Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, State of Knowledge Management, Top 3 Trends for 2015, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by Transversal. My name is Ingen Triago, your moderator for today. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items. Audio is routed through your computer or laptop speakers. If you encounter audio quality or technical issues, let us know right away via the questions panel. You may access full screen view via the toggle button located at the top right area of the console. We do encourage you to ask questions at any time via the questions panel. If you don't get to your question today, we will follow up with you via email. We also encourage you to tweet out your insights and takeaways from today's live presentation using the @TransversalTalk and @TSIA community Twitter handles. And finally, a link to the recorded version of today's webinar and the PDF of the presentation will be sent out in the next 24 hours via email. Once again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Our presenters today are John Ragsdale, VP Research Technology and Social for TSIA, and Chris Hall, Chief Marketing Officer for Transversal. We do have a lot of exciting content to share during this very interactive session in the next 30 minutes, so let's go ahead and get started by turning things over to our first presenter. John, take it away.
Thank you, Inga. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Very happy to have Chris Hall on the line with me. Chris and I have been working together in various capacities for, 15 years or more now. So we've both been in and around knowledge management for most of our careers, and we're very happy to join you today to talk about the top 3 trends in knowledge management for 2015. So I have just completed my annual knowledge management survey. I had about 220 responses, so thanks very much to everybody who responded. I'll be releasing the findings of that report at our upcoming Technology Services World Conference in Las Vegas, kicking off on October 19th. I'll be doing my Power Hour with all of the findings from the survey, and I'll also be publishing 2 research reports that day, the 2015 State of Knowledge Management and a separate report about engineering the virtual knowledge base. Well, I don't want to give away everything from the survey before we get to Vegas, but I am going to share some of the preliminary findings with you today, kind of as a teaser. So very happy to have everybody here to see some of these early results. So today, Chris and I are going to be talking about these 3 trends: consolidating knowledge platforms, rewarding incenting employees for knowledge KPIs, and building executive support for knowledge programs. We've got a lot of content, and I'm going to go ahead and dive in to our first trend around consolidating knowledge platforms. So the point of this is that you see on the upper left-hand side the traditional KCS knowledge base. The knowledge base has been around since probably the late 80s was when I implemented my first knowledge base at a support center, and it continues to be a very critical element for support. But that doesn't mean it's the only game in town. There are a lot of other sources for content that are very helpful in solving customer issues. Obviously, the CRM incident history, other customers that have had this problem and how you worked with them on that. Forum threads, one of the findings from my survey is the average days to publish a new piece of content in the knowledge base is 12 days, with some companies reporting that their time is as much as 120 days to publish a new article. So communities and forums are becoming a very important source because they fill that void. If it's taking 12 days to get into the knowledge base, if people are looking for an answer before then, the forum is a quick and easy way because you can post new content there in under 1 minute. So also we have social media, content management systems, all of your manuals, your online documentation, etc., as well as external content sources accessible by Google or whatever. So I'm going to be talking in Vegas about the idea that all of this together is forming a virtual knowledge base, and it needs to be invisible to people where that content is stored. They can do one search and find the content from whatever repository it happens to be in. So creating this virtual knowledge base not only gives you single search access to all the repositories, but as we're going to hear about from Chris, there's new cognitive learning available that's going to drastically improve the success of those search results. And finally, underlying analytics, we're going to be talking about this today, to automate the knowledge maintenance, take some of the pain out of that process of keeping your content current and relevant for your customers and for your employees. So with that, I'd like to bring into the conversation Chris Hall, the Chief Marketing Officer from Transversal. Chris, welcome to the webinar today.
Thanks, John, and yeah, it has been an interesting 15 years. We go back a long time, and it's an absolute pleasure always to present with you. So I'm flying a bit blind here, being in the airport lounge, so I'm going to trust Inga to help me go through the slides here. But this first slide you should be seeing up is what I call the disjointed evolution of KM technology. So let's take a little tour here on how this wonderful, fun mess began. And the funny thing was, back in the 1980s, and the 1880s, so it happens when I'm in England. Back in the 1980s, at this point, I wasn't even in my product management career, and I'm sure, John, you were at that point as well. I think we hit it when we hit the next era. I was a customer on the phone. I was an agent on the phone trying to deliver accurate answers, and being new on the phone, I probably didn't have any answers. I had to stand in line and get my answer at the answer desk and come back and look at my big parts book to see if I could find answers. But it's right around the time first generation informational KM came into place, and for anyone at the phone back in the 1980s, it was just a godsend. The problem being, from a consumer perspective, the end customer, is it was a bottleneck. I mean, you had one source of truth, but you had to go to the contact center to get it, or go to a service desk, a local service desk to get it. So it really bottlenecked customers. And if we advance to the next slide, and this is about the time I think John and I first started our careers in the knowledge space, late 80s, early 90s, is when all the multi-channel stuff came out. The Kanas and the E-Gains and the Mustang software is going way back in regards to, we needed easier way for consumers to access the information, but now we have really good technologies that can help automate email, but probably not the same technology as on the desktop, especially during the startup era of all the multi-channel applications. So I remember, my old days at Kana, when we were an applications vendor, we had 3 different knowledge bases through acquisitions. And I know some people on the phone from Microsoft and Oracle and others, they've acquired many technologies over the years. But what happened from the customer's perspective is we now have silos of information all over the place. And if we advance to the next slide, in the early 2000s, the third generation, so I call the second generation contextual, because we could really make knowledge contextual across conversation-based channels such as chat and email, where you actually have context to put knowledge around. But the third generation got really interesting. And I know when I was at a vendor prior to Transversal, the third generation really scared us, because there's a lot of social information being shared pretty quickly, and it was almost as if they were going to own the data. But I think a lot of us, and this is a important audience, a lot of us do troubleshooting our own, whether it's our iPhones or PCs or devices at home. We use forums, and I know from my own experience, you could basically waste hours and hours. You could spend 2 in the morning to try to find your problem. And then eventually when you get your answer, are you really sure? So we've gone to one single source of truth, to many sources of truth, now to the era of, am I getting any truths whatsoever? Well, let's talk about what I consider kind of the next generation technology. Actually, sorry, if you go to the next slide, what's the real cost of not consolidating? And this might be a little bit of motherhood and apple pie. Obviously, if you're a service delivery provider, service consistency and management of information is extremely critical. And if you tend to have silos of information, and if you're working in any large organization that has multi-languages, it just gets impossible from that standpoint. And you certainly have no single source of truth. So now we're looking at what's going to help this through. From a consumer perspective or an executive perspective, the biggest problem is satisfaction, loyalty, and lost revenue. There was a great report that was published last year, and Accenture kind of resurrected it this year with a press release, that the consumer loyalty is dropping in the U.S., and the revenue opportunity that provides on an annual basis is $1.6 trillion of customers switching organizations due to poor service. So this is not a small problem. It's an absolutely huge problem. So if we go to the next slide, I talk about what are the problems with traditional KM tools, and why are we keep throwing different technologies at it to solve an age-old problem of really delivering a smart, accurate answer. Well, KM technologies, when you look at the overall spectrum of data to wisdom and understanding in context, most KM technologies fall really low. They fall down in the area of just storing and retrieving data. High implementation efforts, extremely laborious to maintain. In some cases, low search accuracy, although I think search accuracy has really picked up over the years. But a lot of manual categorization, and sometimes manual categorization just to get the search accuracy up to date. Difficulty to integrate, that's kind of gone away with SaaS technologies, although I think the technologists trying to integrate SaaS would say that's not completely gone away. Questionable accuracy, not only from the standpoint of search getting better, but the advice you're getting from a community. And in the end, overall, poor user adoption, and that'll kill a project really quickly. But it's the contextual intelligence I think really takes it to the next level. If you click on the next slide, so our goal as a vendor in this space, that's all we concentrate on, is to try to take our game to the next level. And we believe that that KM technologies need a step change. Yeah, I'm a marketing guy, so I'm going to coin a new phrase, but it's a phrase that IBM has been working with, right? And there's a lot of IBM people on the phone. Real cognitive KM. How can we get machine learning, machine matching, and machine understanding to help us through the process that a seasoned service individual would understand on their own? So our goal with this next generation KM is to minimize the effort required simply for people to find, consume, and share what they know. And for those of you who don't know the Transversal brand, on the next slide, and I'm hoping they're advancing fine, is what we call our Prescience technology. Prescience technology is a platform that we have for all of our technologies together, that when we go to market, we call our product Prescience for Web Self-Service and Prescience Advisor for Contact Centers. Our Prescience platform, with all the features you see on the right, really improves the natural findability of knowledge. All the NLQ, all the concept matching. The cool part about it is there's not a lot of manual categorization that was traditionally needed with semantic search technology. We're doing a lot of the matching for you automatically. Not only do we do that, but we also anticipate the next question the customer is going to ask. So if you had a chance to see, I had a webinar earlier this week, we kind of went through a click-through showing you that no customers, when you answer the first question, are not going to ask another question. They always do. So we're doing a lot of anticipation of not only what they might be typing to semantically match some results pretty quickly, but also when we've answered the first question, we're semantically matching the next answer to the next question that are coming up. The other thing that we're doing, and John mentioned a little bit about early warnings, is monitoring the need for knowledge. So in a lot of service scenarios, our customers and our administrators are saying, I really wish I had a little bit faster insight as to what could potentially hit in my contact center or my service center next. And the same semantic technology that we're leveraging to do a bunch of categorization and clustering of information, we're doing the same thing with social knowledge. So whether you're pointing our monitoring solution at a Twitter feed, or you're pointing it at an aggregator like Moreover, or even pointing it at your own website to find out what search is happening, we're using technology to automatically cluster the information together. So instead of you having to know what to look for, we're going to give you levels of information and categorization automatically to say that we believe this particular activity is hitting threshold really fast. For us, it's all about simplifying the administration of knowledge. And for the first topic, John, I'll stop there and pass it back to you.
All right, well, let's move on to our trend number 2, which is about rewarding and incenting employees for knowledge KPIs. And I'm going to be talking a lot about this in Vegas, but I think that the key here is we've all got a lot of demands on our time. We've got a lot of responsibilities at our job, and usually you have more than you can do in a day. And when you start deciding, how am I going to spend my time today, you're influenced by which of my activities are driving revenue for the company and which of the activities are listed in my performance appraisal as the things that are the most important for me to do. So what I find is we know that there is a huge potential for improving productivity with knowledge, improving the customer experience with knowledge, and yet when we ask people, do you tie knowledge management activity or outcomes to performance or incentive compensation, 2/3 of companies say there is no link. And I am telling you that as important as this is, if you have nothing in your performance appraisals, if you have no sort of incentive compensation set up for knowledge, what you're doing is sending a subtle or maybe even not so subtle message to your employees that knowledge really isn't important. And the other issue is, if you are going to have some kind of reward system set up, it needs to be about outcomes, not about activities. And by that I mean, we were talking before we started the webinar today that one of the first mistakes every knowledge manager makes is thinking, wow, we need more content in the knowledge base. I'm going to incent my agents to enter more content. And I remember those days back in the late 80s when I had my first knowledge base, and every agent was responsible for 5 or 10 knowledge articles a month, and you would get to the last day of the month and realize, oh my gosh, I haven't hit my number. Let me submit a bunch of junk just so I can hit that number. And that's a great way to get a lot of garbage into a knowledge base. So rewarding people for outcomes is looking at what is the impact of the content, who's submitting the most useful, the content that's tagged in the most cases as solving the problem, who's getting the most thumbs up clicks from the customers. Information like that helps you identify not just who's active in the knowledge program, but who's actually having the biggest impact. In order to do that, analytics is a key component. Chris was just mentioning cognitive reasoning and analytics, and it's becoming incredibly important to have this level of sophistication as part of your knowledge management system so you can understand who's really doing the good work, who's understanding the best practices here that maybe we can capture and share with other employees. So, Chris, talk to me about your take on how do we get employees incented or rewarded to engage in knowledge.
Yeah, John, when we first put our stuff down, our topics down, I kind of struggled with this one a little bit because I was looking at it the wrong way, and then it reminded me we have at Transversal kind of a Thursday morning brainstorm meeting with all of the brightest products teams that we can possibly bring together, and we've been arguing a long time on what the next generation incentives is going to be for our application, for our application, and it came down to a couple of different philosophies, and I look at it as old school versus new school. The first slide that you see here, old school is all about reward and punishment. We're both used to that back in the 80s and 90s of being incented, and I don't know about you, John, but I'm kind of the same way. When you tell me something to do, it's probably not going to happen. I think my wife will probably be laughing if she heard this webinar. She knows that real well. But if it happens naturally and I want to help somebody, I'll do it by nature. And I think us older product guys, as we look at the anomalies of Facebook and why people are compelling to share that I'm in the BA lounge on a webinar is beyond me. But the psychology behind what's happening with sharing these days is certainly we have a lot to learn. So I want to call it new school. So my personal viewpoint on knowledge incentives is not old school, and it's moving towards new school social currency. And let me kind of take you down that path. So if we go to the next slide, again, I'm going to go right back to my first generation. What did it start out? And hopefully this build is building out to the right-hand side where you're seeing my lovely carrot. So when we started out in the 80s, when knowledge bases were first put out and built out, it had to have been a carrot. You had to get people to contribute and put information in. But it wasn't a carrot for all agents. It was a carrot for knowledge workers. And we gave it as a carrot for Tier 2 agents. Tier 2 agents took time off the phone to be able to contribute and add information to the knowledge base. If you click on the next slide, or the next animation, I should bring up second generation. And second generation was the explosion of all different types of knowledge. Knowledge for chat, knowledge for email, knowledge for web, knowledge for contact center. They could all be separate, but we now had a serious issue of content and content, so it became more of a stick. So it was measured, and it became a KPI that you had to have a certain amount of contributions to your knowledge. But a bit of a stick from my perspective, because I'm not being told what to do. I'm told I have to contribute to the knowledge. And we all know when that happens, there's always those in the group that contribute, but they just contribute for the sake of contribute, but they're not contributing, solid stuff. So I think what's happened over the years is that contribution has gone from numbers to usage and likes and so on and so forth. But then along came social again. So if we click on the next animation, the third generation, social brought in, now I've got partners, and I've got super users, and I've got customers. And companies like Microsoft, and even go back to Lotus Notes, have done a phenomenal job at building up partner networks. And luckily, from a Microsoft standpoint, they don't get too much into the gamification. The gamification started to come in at that play. And a lot of our customers from the transversal side use that to incent customers to help others and use that for reward points for their particular packages or services. But when I look at where we need to go next, we really have to adopt, and if you click on the next animation, then comes to the top, the next generation cognitive. And I think we have a lot to learn, but also a lot to adopt on what's happening with social. And I'm going to call it social currency. If we click to the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about social currency. So these are things that we all see and know as we log into our LinkedIn or to our Facebook or to our Pinterest accounts. But sharing information on to other people is an impulse that we're basically just hardwired with. Just the thought of sharing activities, our brains are reward centers even before we've done anything. So we're really stimulated psychologically by doing this. And really it all comes about self-preservation, strengthening of relationships, and I believe the communities have done a lot here. First, it comes back to our own self-image. There were some studies that I've just read recently saying 68% of people say they share to give others a better sense of who they are and what they care about. But the biggest reason we share is all about people. And 78% I read of people say they share because it helps them stay connected to other people. So there's a huge psychology behind social currency and social incentives that I think the knowledge community would be huge to adopt, and we certainly are with transversal. If we go to the next slide, but there are some basic steps that make it really simple and easy from our perspective, the things that we're doing right now, such as making sure on the agent side, if you're going to be using knowledge on the agent side, to make knowledge use, to improve use and sharing, first of all, integration is imperative. And I don't mean integration in a tab format so that I could go over and use transversal, or I could use Covea or someone as a separate tool. But I mean, as the agent is typing out their form, and as an example here, I'm using Salesforce. As the agent is typing out their form, the content, the categorization, the context of, as I'm typing it in, we're automatically driving the answers that are there. So it's there whether you like it or not, but it's very easy to use. So integration is imperative. If we go to the next slide, not only is integration imperative, but don't overcomplicate agents contributing. Ensure the feedback from an agent is streamlined and convenient. So what you're seeing here, it would normally just be a thumbs up or thumbs down on the consumer side, and if I thumbs up, it moves on. But I could add this to a case with one click. I could email it to a customer with one click. I could post this to Chatter with one click. That's really simplistic stuff. If I give it a thumbs down, I can then easily with one click say I got a broken link or missing information or question not answered. It's really simple behavior that is not too cumbersome to ensure that agents are going to do. And if I say other, sure, let's add some free-form text. But I'm not popping up a complete admin console for an agent to do multimedia rich text. That just doesn't seem realistic from that standpoint. If we go to the next slide, I'll then drill into some really interesting psychology around what rewards and contributions. So just as I go back to the very beginning, I'm not a big fan of carrot and stick, but I'm a big fan of rewarding contributions. People do need rewards. It's very hard if in your service center today you're rewarding people for contributing to the knowledge base. You can't stop that. Once you get that train rolling, you got to let it go, but don't require it. Reward those that want to contribute. The ones that don't get compensated, but they eventually will pick it up. Because the 5 top reasons for people to share social media is really interesting, and it starts with the neuroscience. We share to entertain, inspire, and be useful. And then it moves on to psychology elements. We share to express who we really are. And I know this might be, you might be thinking this more of a personal standpoint, but no, I think a lot of this comes into play when you're talking about, I share text with a lot of ex-colleagues that I have that are now in management positions in marketing. We share information back and forth all the time. We share to express who we really are. The third one is we want to belong to a community. Whether it's I subscribe to a community of technical articles or product publications, to nurture our relationships with the others who are similar. But we're also motivated to feel more involved with our community and our organization, especially very dispersed organizations and large organizations like a Cisco or even an IBM. And the fifth element is all about altruism. And really people do feel compelled about getting the word out about specific causes. And just as an example, this same article, it was quite comical to me, but it's exactly how, probably the mentality of the way I think. If you click the animation here, there was a post done on Facebook, and yes, a bit tongue-in-cheek. So somebody said, like this post, and they painted it on a telephone post. The irony here was they were told to like this post. How do you not like this post? And the irony out of 5,500 users, only 42 liked it. 550 who thought it was interesting shared it, but they didn't do what they were told. So it's quite interesting from that standpoint that there's still a lot to learn around the psychology of social sharing, but also social currency. And I do think that's the next generation that cognitive technologies like transversal and KM vendor will start to adopt. And I'll pass it back to you, John.
All right, well, we're up to our number 3 trend, which is building executive support for knowledge programs. And this is one of the big focus areas of my 2015 State of Knowledge Management report. And it's a pretty complicated topic, so I'm just going to hit it at a really high level here. But the data story is, from the survey, I have this data showing that more than 40% of companies think that if they were sharing knowledge as well as they possibly could, they would see an improvement in productivity of 30% or more. However, when you ask them to rate how good their current knowledge platforms are, the numbers are really low, like 4 on a 10-point scale. When you ask them about the knowledge sharing culture of their companies, the ratings aren't that good. When you ask them about how many people are dedicated to knowledge authoring and maintenance, the numbers are very low. So we have a situation where we know that there is tremendous potential, but we don't have the right culture, we don't have the right budget to get things done. So I think it starts with making sure that executives are familiar with the potential, where you are in realizing that potential, and what the boundaries are or the barriers to getting there. So I have one data point here for you. When we ask if KM metrics are part of executive operational reviews, 40% say that executives don't care about KM metrics, 31% say they may periodically review them. So my advice to you is, we've got a lot of data about KM's potential. Chris and I have worked previously on an ROI report on where the ROI for KM comes from, so we know what that is. So make sure they understand how much savings you can get, whether that's through self-service success or deflection or productivity improvements. Make sure they understand what's at stake here. Ask them to lead by example. A lot of this is cultural, and executives need to be saying in company meetings that sharing knowledge is critical. And you've got to include those KM metrics and the impacts and your progress in getting to your goals in those quarterly or annual reviews with the executives. Whether they ask for them or not, I would encourage you to include those to make them part of the conversation. So Chris, we're getting pretty close on time here. We've got a couple of slides left. What are your thoughts on getting executives to understand knowledge metrics?
Oh, John, we could probably do almost a whole series on this particular one, because this one's near and dear to my heart. Possibly because I believe, and I'm sure a lot of my peer vendors on the phone believe, that a lot of companies undervalue web self-service. And it's a technology that automates millions of customer answers. It's like, how could that not be one of the most valuable things you could implement and be sacred? But it's really simple. So I'm going to give you a nice shameless plug to start with. I know you work with a lot of us vendors this summer. The only thing I hate about the top of this slide is it says March 27. We had 9 feet of snow in Boston at that point. So that brings back bad memories. But the great memories were, this report is a great report out of all the cool stuff that most of the vendors in this space are doing around analytics and knowledge management. But when you click through and you talk about what the top KM vendors provide out of this report, this is what I kind of took down, John. Content gap analysis, session analysis, top article analysis, and I won't drill into each one. Everyone on the phone understands what they are. But if you click through next, these analytics do not match what service execs care about. It's pretty straightforward what service execs care about in our area. They care about customer satisfaction. Do we measure it? I don't see that on the left. They care about self-service effectiveness. Do we measure that? Well, we have some service session analysis, so maybe. Do we have a cost savings via self-service on the left-hand side? No. Do we have what it increases for CSR productivity? or first contact resolutions? No. So we're just not really on the executive agenda just yet. When you click on the next slide, so let's take an example of what service execs do focus on. And I know this is simplistic, but let's just say it's CSAT right in the middle. And the ones on the outside, service execs primarily focus on one service metric, whether it's cost takeout. In this case, I'm going to say customer sat. All secondary metrics support and align to the primary. If we click through and take the KM analytics, once again, the KM metrics, content gap analysis, session analysis, top article analysis, contributor analysis, don't align to customer sat. So we've been working really hard. If you go to the next slide, for our future development, we're calling knowledge KPIs. Anybody with an Apple Watch, yes, shameless rip-off on the right-hand side, but it's really interesting for you to follow my thread here. Our next generation knowledge KPIs are executive level metrics that help determine the value and success of self-service activities. I'm going to start with the inner circle. It's called explicit ratings. That's pretty simple. Somebody clicks a thumbs up on your website, right? But you also know that that's probably less than 5% of the actual people that use knowledge management on the web actually give it a thumbs up, right? So that's explicit. So I expect it to be low. But what about implicit? Well, how do we track that? Well, I know if I go to HP's website and download a driver search the knowledge base and download a driver and go away, that's a pretty normal behavior for most people. If I search and search and search and search and keep going all over the place, 5 minutes later I just leave, that's probably negative. So there are behaviors implicitly that we can track that say, yes, this answered my question. Add one more. We also know the session analysis. We add that to that. That scores my effort. So what we're doing is working with some of our top customers to take those 3 key initiatives, explicit ratings, implicit behaviors, and effort to really come up with what we consider a visual CSAT of what's going on the web. Then couple that with self-service SLAs. We know how many incidents that we resolved on the web because we have implicit and explicit message. We know how much we're deflecting. We know how many are abandoning. I can now actually start setting SLAs for my knowledge workers to say the number of incidents we resolved last month has to increase because that's saving the company X amount of dollars. The number of abandoned and deflected, your rates right now, let's say 13%. Next month it can't go down. So now we're starting to set metrics just like the contact center and other service centers. And we have to get there. And the last one is customer effort. We actually do, when we publish articles, it's available to SEO. Yet we don't do a great job, but we need to surface that to say, hey, we're driving 35% more contacts to your website through our SEO knowledge referrals. We also know what first search resolution, we're all familiar with first contact resolution. We should also know first search resolution as a metric for our search tuning people to make sure they're on top of. We should also have first visit resolution, which is the same as first contact resolution, as well as average session time. If we start measuring ourselves to this level of knowledge KPIs, I guarantee you anybody that's specifically focused from a web self-service perspective will start getting on the executive agenda. And I know that's all I had today. If you liked what we talked about, there's certainly a bunch more that we certainly could. Just wanted to let you know we will be one of the sponsors in Vegas at TSW on October 19th to the 21st. We'd love to talk to you and give you a demo and stop by and see some of the smarter guys that we have on our booth. But I know we're running short on time, John, so I'll pass it right back to you.
Well, Chris and John, thank you very much for a fantastic session today. You shared some really, really fascinating data on where the industry is going, especially with social sharing and social currency. So we are coming to the conclusion of today's webinar. Just want to remind everyone on today's webinar that a link to the recorded version of the webinar and a link to download the presentation will be sent out in the next 24 hours via email. Any questions that we didn't get to today, we'll also be sure to follow up with you via email as well. Thank you, everyone, for taking time in your busy schedules to join us in today's webinar, State of Knowledge Management, Top 3 Trends for 2015, brought to you by TSIA and sponsored by Transversal. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar very soon. Have a great day, everyone.